thought, we stand up to political correctness, and we reject left-wing lunacy, and in particular, we reject cancel culture.
President Trump there using his comeback speech over the weekend to speak out against cancel culture. The conservative crowd went wild, of course, but what is it about cancel culture that they fear and loathe so much? Well, from their perspective, it's rather like the witch hunts of old.
A society in the grip of political correctness is on the lookout for the scapegoat, who will heal its divisions by showing that it is he, not they, who is the cause of them.
What are we in here but back to one of the most basic unpleasant things in our species, the ability to have witch hunting trials?
From the Salem trial witch hunts to McCarthyism, cancel culture is the exact same playbook.
Cancel culture.
Cancel culture. Cancel culture. It's defined as withdrawing support for public figures and companies after they've done or said something considered objectionable or offensive.
Someone says something deemed offensive or troubling to someone else, and social media goes into a frenzy.
Oh, that person's canceled. I'm not going to buy their albums. I'm not going to go to their concerts. I'm not going to watch their TV show.
I don't like this person, and nobody else should either, and that's why I hate it.
Finally, we're in this moment where we as a culture are realizing, hey, look, some of this content that maybe the mainstream kind of considered was, acceptable is no longer acceptable.
Those who have been driving cancel culture want to create a society that is equitable, that is tolerant, that is inclusive.
People do have to challenge, but cancelling is not challenging.
Cancel just sounds like good old-fashioned bullying.
Cancel! Those people who are so ready for cancel culture are the same ones that back in the day would be so ready to hang a witch.
It's a whole phenomena that people just are looking to be angry and outraged.
It's very toxic. It's toxic for the people that are doing it. It's toxic for the people that are receiving it. It's not a way that human beings would ever communicate in one-on-one.
People are being punished. People are losing their careers and their livelihoods.
What is liberal about cancelling everybody and anything that you don't happen to agree with? It's a complete nonsense.
Well, a nonsense or not, it depends on your point of view. And today we have two very different points of view. Two Nexus regulars. You may recognize them. Scott Lucas, Professor of American Studies at Birmingham University, and Andre Walker, a conservative journalist and political commentator. Let's just start by establishing the rules of engagement here, gentlemen. Scott, how would you define cancel culture?
Oh, it's a meaningless term in terms of giving it substance apart from being a political weapon. In other words, the term was used by those, whipped up last year, specifically because they felt that their positions of power or that their abuse of power, in some cases, might be threatened over consideration of social issues. There is no mass cancel culture in the United States in a conspiracy either against right or left. Indeed, if you wanted to talk about what was being canceled at the time, there were questions about the Trump administration canceling the rights of many people in the United States, including legal immigrants, including in some cases peoples of color. There was a president who would try to cancel an election and overturn it. When the courts ruled against him, he tried to cancel them and say they didn't have authority. When Congress acted in a way he didn't like, he tried to cancel it by shutting down the government in 2019 for more than 5 weeks, a record in U.S. history. I've lived through terms which have been used such as political correctness, wokeness, and it is used quite often by one group against another, not to actually engage with the issues that are raised, but just to simply push those away. You're trying to cancel me. Trust me, Piers Morgan has not been canceled. Donald Trump has not been canceled, and neither Andre nor I have been canceled.
Okay, well, look, I'm sure Andre's got a list that he can draw on to define cancel culture. Go for it.
Well, look, the fundamental problem is always this, and I'd actually take this back a bit further. I believe that ever since the fall of the Soviet Union, it's been impossible for the political left to say that the world would be a better place if we were left-wing, if we had the systems of economics or quote-unquote democracy. The only way you can push through left-wing policies to a modern audience is to attempt to prevent anybody from challenging them. That is what cancel culture is absolutely all about. It's a you can't say that type thing. The amazing thing was, I remember Steve Bannon once said in a speech that that we should embrace, or we should accept that we will be called racist. And what he meant by that was there's no doubt that if you attempt to stand up for your country, if you attempt to be patriotic, if you attempt to oppose left-wingery in academia, you will be accused of being a racist. The purpose of that is to prevent people from being able to speak out for what they believe in. But that is something that the political left has always been hugely interested in. The idea that you've got to stop people speaking, the idea that you've got to make it socially acceptable to hold certain views. That's what we're seeing increasingly. And what I think is the biggest danger is not actually attacking somebody like Donald Trump or Piers Morgan. It's the low-level stuff. It's the inability of people within their own university lectures to speak their own mind. It's the inability of conservatives to speak on campus.
Let's just pick up on that point.
It's the idea that you want to start pulling down statues.
Yeah, let's just pick up on that point because, Scott, the UK government has recently announced plans to appoint a so-called free speech champion for English universities. And it's looking likely that academics and students may even be allowed to sue those universities if they feel censored or deplatformed. Doesn't that indicate there is a need here, there is an actual problem?
No, because the statement you're referring to from the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, was a puff statement to distract attention because there had been some bad news on Brexit that day. There's absolutely no substance behind what was said there. Because in fact, and you'll notice that Andre Walker, who said the political left, just whips up this entire class of folks who supposedly are unhappy and critical because communism hasn't succeeded. In other words, he just made that up. I'm quite a happy guy, in fact.
So people aren't being deplatformed, people aren't losing their jobs for saying, in inverted commas, the wrong thing, something that might go against the progressive orthodoxy, perhaps?
No, I'd be interested in the cases that come up here. I mean, for example, let me talk to you a little bit about where cancel culture is used both the right and the left on the same issue. And that is whenever you have a discussion on campuses about Israel and Palestine, because of the nature of that political conflict, it can quite often get heated. We've actually had security issues when that issue has been considered. Now, the right have argued in the past that people have been deplatformed because it's been hard to establish, in other words, the condition for the event. So have the left, who right now are defending a lecturer at the University of Bristol who has made statements which are claimed to have been anti-Semitic. So what happens is both sides try to manipulate this idea of, oh, there's an absolute free speech and it's been transgressed by actually lifting it from the circumstances. And I would be interested in one single case that either you or that Andre present here about supposedly the cancellation of someone solely because they have a particular conservative or liberal point of view. And I bet we can establish that, in fact, that wasn't what happened.
What happened to Professor Gregory Clark then when he went to, well, he was going to present a Zoom lecture to the University of Glasgow. And he had spent a great deal of time looking at how genetics affects, economic outcomes over a 270-year period in England. And a couple of students from theatre studies, from the sociology department, whatever, got together and they got on Instagram and they basically defamed him, in his words, as a eugenicist. And then the dean capitulated and cancelled or indefinitely postponed his lecture. And this is a man who is a visiting professor at the London School of Economics. He was educated at Harvard and at Cambridge. And he's respected at the University of California, Davis. What happened with him?
Oh, in Gregory Clark's view, you can talk people who have considered him, quote, respected in his views. But you can also talk about people who have referred to Gregory Clark and argue that he, in fact, is promoting eugenics. Now, certainly Gregory Clark has the right to promote eugenics if he wishes to, as a person having that particular point of view.
I mean, eugenics, Scott, would be saying that some people should procreate because they have desirable qualities and that others shouldn't because they have undesirable qualities. And he's never said that, at least not in the lecture or in his books.
Eugenics, to start off with, Matthew, and this is why we have to be precise to be clear. Eugenics is to argue that, in fact, because of genetic makeup, that one particular group of people have superior qualities to another based solely on some type of essential biological formulation. What you're referring to is that some people have used eugenics, such as Nazi Germany in the 1930s,
right,
to pursue policies which have effectively tried to exterminate or limit classes of people. So let's be very clear. Professor Clark wasn't promoting those policies, but the actual promotion of a position, which is a eugenics position, at the very least, again, when we talk about providing a platform, there probably should be a platform in which not only Professor Clark, but someone else who might not agree with that position on eugenics were allowed to engage in dialogue. Now, that's not the way that this discussion was set up. And therefore, there were students who said, no, look,
So
this
he
is
was
only one side of the
invited.
argument.
He was invited by the business school to give a lecture, and then through the power of people organising online, he was essentially, that platform was taken away from him. So you're saying it's a fair and reasonable thing, an outcome that happened, that he was not allowed to speak at University of Glasgow.
I'm saying we can debate whether it's fair or reasonable in terms of whether or not that was removed. But to argue that Gregory Clark's case represents a widespread cancel culture that is affecting all of the United Kingdom, no, that's when the politics get into play.
Okay. Let's look at the United States then. The National Association of Scholars says it's very worried about what's going on at universities there. They've compiled a list of 128 academics who have been cancelled in recent years, including Gordon Klein, a lecturer in accounting at UCLA, who was asked to award lenient grades to black students because they may have been traumatized by the killing of George Floyd. Now, he declined via this email in which he derided the request and said it went against Martin Luther King's teachings of not judging people by their skin color. Now, some found it sarcastic, others said they were deeply offended. Professor Klein was suspended and, according to the NAS, received police protection after receiving multiple death threats. What do you make of that case, first of all, Scott, and then Andre, please?
Well, again, the facts in the Gordon Klein case, going through it, is that Gordon Klein was not suspended because of his particular view in terms of the request, in terms of what it means in terms of black students versus white students, in terms of his view of what should take place in terms of academic conduct after, amidst the environment, with the killing of George Floyd. He was suspended because of the manner in which he responded in a direct email, in effectively a capacity saying I'm a professor, to one particular student. The student complained about the tone of the letter, about, in other words, the brusque dismissal of the request, and that is why the case was investigated. Now, again, you may make the argument that perhaps this case should not have been investigated, or perhaps in the end, that Gordon Klein's reinstatement is where we should have been all along. But to argue that Gordon Klein was canceled because of his particular views, whether it be on accountancy, where he serves, whether it be on his view of racial issues, or whether it be on his view of being an educator, no, that's not what happened in this case.
Andre?
Doesn't it sound a little bit to anybody watching this that what has happened time and time again is that there is a technicality found in order to get rid of these people? So Scott Lucas, quite right, points out that nobody ever phones up these academics and says, you don't have the same views as us, therefore you're out the door. It's always, no, it was absolutely fine for him to have this view. It was that one sentence he said in the email, or it was that time that he returned a book late, or it was that occasion that he did whatever. Look, there's no doubt about it that these universities are buckling under pressure from a group of students. Now, I think it's important to bear in mind the major problem with the cancel culture is that I would say a majority of students secretly do not support any of it. And what's happening is they're being bullied by a small number of people. And you talk about Israel, you know, I saw at the Oxford Union huge protests when Steve Bannon turned up, and not a squeak when George Galloway turned up. Well, one or two people inside the hall itself. The point is, nobody minds anybody objecting to one person's point of view, but the political left believe that the right don't have a right to exist and don't have a right to express their views at all. And so the problem is not that you want to call out people that you disagree with on Israel or on Palestine. The problem is that the minute that you go against what the left-wing establishment believe is important, what those student unions and activists on campus think. I mean, bear in mind, you can be deplatformed for having a view on climate change they don't like. It's not always about race
quick
or
response
politics.
from Scott.
Andre, you want to make things up? Make things up. Create a mythical political left. Make yourself the victim of some supposed mass conspiracy. But in fact, we're not talking about technicalities being used as part of this conspiracy. We're talking about real life. I've been an educator for more than 35 years. You have to work with a lot of students. You have to adhere to professional standards to do so. That's not a technicality. Just as it's not a technicality when Donald Trump goes on Twitter and arguably incites violence. He was removed because he violated Twitter's terms of service.
Well, okay.
Now,
Let me make a point on that. Let me make a point on that. Donald Trump was accused of incitement on Twitter, and what did Apple do as a result? They shut down a website called Parler. Now, if that isn't
right,
a
and you know why they shut down
example
Parler?
of cancel
Why did they shut
culture-
down Parler, Andre?
Well,
Why did they
it
shut
couldn't
down
have
Parler?
been. It couldn't have been because of Donald Trump. He wasn't on it.
Because Parler, in fact, is where extreme right-wing groups, including militia, were organizing for activities such as the Capitol attack.
So why didn't Apple shut down Twitter then? If Twitter was the place where the incitement had taken place by Donald Trump, why did they shut down the one that was conservatively owned, but not the one that was liberal owned?
Because Twitter acted responsibly, not as part of cancel culture, but when someone violated their terms of service, even though he was the president of the United States, they suspended that account. When you talk about Steve Bannon, who supposedly is being deplatformed, and in fact, Steve Bannon was still allowed to speak. Steve Bannon has espoused racist views. Now, he may defend those racist views. He may defend those white nationalist views. But do not portray Steve Bannon as being a victim from a massive political left, just as I would not say that criticism of George Galloway, whose views I disagree with, is some type of victim of a conspiracy on the right.
We're going to have to leave it there. I think you're going to continue to disagree. Naturally, Scott Lucas, Andre Walker, thank you for your contributions to the Nexus today. Well, it's a bit awkward, isn't it? Because cancel culture, we were about to say, isn't limited to any particular area. It affects people from all walks of life because, as we've just heard, it may not even exist at all. But we have seen people in entertainment lose their jobs. Kevin Hart hounded out of the presenting Oscars role. There was an attempt at destroying J.K. Rowling's book sales for comments she made about women and transgender women. And sometimes the cancelling happens not online, but in the workplace. Remember the KPMG boss, Bill Michael, who was sort of forced to quit his job because he told staff there was no such thing as unconscious bias and suggested staff should stop moaning about working at home during the pandemic. Now, this hounding of people for having different points of view is compared by some to the McCarthy era of the 40s and 50s in the United States. Senator Joseph McCarthy led a campaign against communism in America, and it was the most politically repressive period in the country's history, arguably. The government investigated people suspected of having communist sympathies and sought to purge the political establishment, the army, and, of course, Hollywood.
Are you or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? I believe I have the right to be confronted with any evidence which supports this question. I should like to see what you have. Oh, well, you would. Yes. Well, you will pretty soon.
Well, let's bring in our final guest now, and we're joined by a conservative academic who's very much against cancel culture, Dr. Carol Swain, formerly of Princeton University. She now hosts a podcast called Be the People. And Joy Villa is a singer, songwriter, and proud conservative who says she's been cancelled more times than she can remember. We'll start with Dr. Carol Swain. Dr. Carol Swain, we've just been talking about McCarthyism and what a stain that was on America's history. People like yourself, you actually think that your country is actually going through a new period of McCarthyism. How is there a resemblance?
It certainly is. And, you know, some of the revisionists have actually looked at Joe McCarthy and some of the people that he identified and some of the allegations, and they've actually said that he was correct about communists being everywhere. But our country certainly saw that as a period of shame where mistakes were made, and it was something that we never wanted to repeat. We are going through a period like McCarthyism where people are losing their jobs, their livelihoods. They are being targeted because of their beliefs.
Now, in some cases, they actually have it coming to them in that they've committed a criminal act. But we're talking about today where it's just a difference of political views.
Yes, we're talking about thought crimes in some cases, people who are suspected to be enemies because of their lifestyles. And when I mean lifestyles, if you are a Christian conservative nowadays, and especially in academia, there would be very few that would be um, in openly practicing. And the cancel culture started even before we were using that concept, and they were identifying people. There were efforts being made to oust them, I would say, from the universities, and that we call it cancel culture today, but it really is very much like McCarthyism.
Joy Villa, now recently you went in front of Congress and you testified about conservatives in the media. Let's have a quick listen to that first.
Ms. Villa?
Mr. Chairman, ranking members, and members of this committee, thank you for inviting me to speak. I was blacklisted from industry events. I was not welcome on talk shows. I was not included in pop culture magazines or publications unless as the butt of a joke. To be clear, this did not happen because I'm Black or because I'm Latina or because I'm a woman. It happened because I'm openly conservative. What happened to me is discrimination. They don't like pro-Trumpers, pro-America, pro-life, or pro-God. They want to shut down, keep out, and crush any type of diversity because it makes them uncomfortable. They're taking that discomfort and actively, openly discriminating against people in the workplace. We need to stop the discrimination against political affiliation.
So Joy, tell us why exactly you've had, or you believe you've had, far fewer opportunities across the media than you would otherwise have had if you were not conservative.
Absolutely. I've 100% been canceled because I'm a Trump supporter, because I'm a conservative, because I'm a Christian, because I'm pro-life. And I make no bones about it. I say that to my audience. Who I am is who I am. I mean, I famously wore a Trump dress to the Grammys, which was a shame on you. That's the inner sanctum of woke culture. How dare you defy, and even at that moment, that was 4 years ago, I had hashtag feminist on my bio, on Twitter. And I was this social justice warrior before. But once I got involved in conservative political, activities and became an activist for free speech, for the Second Amendment, for the Constitution, and was vocal about that, suddenly the jobs dried up. Suddenly the opportunities, people started saying, oh no, we don't want to hire you. And I've even had people straight up say, not that Trump, we're not going to hire her. No, it was exactly like racism, but instead of them judging me for my race, they judge me because I'm a Trump supporter, because I'm a conservative, and because I'm pro-life.
You talked about how the major studios, whether it's Hollywood or it's the recording studios for the music industry, they proclaim very openly that they're looking for diversity, but you said they're not looking for diversity of thought.
They aren't. They want diversity. So see, I fit in all the boxes, and they don't know what to do with me because I check mark. I'm mixed race. I'm Latina. I'm Black. I'm a female. I have tattoos. I'm vegan. I've toured around the world. So I should be their icon. But when it comes down to my thinking, it's very different than what many people in Hollywood want. So they have to deny me. They don't want diversity of thought. They want you to look different. They want you to have a different sexuality. They want you to have a different, sort of ethnic background. These are all things I support, by the way, and they should. We should have more diversity in the public, but you cannot exclude the most important diversity of all, which is diversity of thought. If we all agree on the same things, then it's a monolith. It's not diversity.
Back in the 40s and 50s, we saw a lot of celebrities, performers, singers, actors, on a so-called McCarthy kind of blacklist. Is that how you feel today in 2021?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Rolling Stone said, just to keep it personal, is they told me they won't write about me. They told my publicist, no, we're not going to write about Joy Villa, which, by the way, I hit #1 on the Billboard charts as an independent artist, no label, sold hundreds of thousands of copies in 4 days at the Grammys for wearing my dress. I mean, I should have been, in the pages, at least a mention of Rolling Stone. And this is not for my personal care, because I don't care if Rolling Stone writes about me. But what I do care is if they write about independent artists and other people who are trying to come up, who have done incredible things, but because they're conservative or because they're pro-life or because their values and their morals and their ethics don't agree with the status quo, they're thereby blacklisted. And it gets even worse than just no press mentions. It gets where people lose their job. I personally know many people, my friends, who've lost their jobs. Even if they're a part of a minority group, LGBT or, feminists or whatever, but because they might have questioned something or because they're thinking of being conservative or a tweet that has just aged badly, which we know that the definition of humor and what is acceptable changes about every 5 years in society. So by these very strict, like the professor said, thought police, right? The thought police come after people for wrongthink. Anyone can be, canceled.
Well, Joy Villa and Carol Swain, thank you so much for your contributions to the Nexus today. Wish we had a bit more time, but I'm afraid we have run out. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. Remember, you can see this episode and all our previous episodes on our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT1. Till next week then, goodbye.